When I married James 32 years ago, I thought we'd grow old together side by side, until death did us part. I'm Sophia, 57 years old, mother of two wonderful children, my daughter Olivia, 28, and my son Daniel, 25, both living their own lives now. After 3 decades of marriage, I thought I knew my husband completely. I was wrong. I've always been the type to put others first. That's what my mother taught me, and that's what I believed marriage was about: sacrifice, compromise, standing by your partner through thick and thin. When James wanted to start his own construction business 25 years ago, I supported him. I put my nursing career on hold, worked part-time instead of pursuing the hospital administration position I'd been eyeing. I managed our household, raised our children, and kept everything running smoothly while he built his dream. "You're the backbone of this family, Soph," he used to say, wrapping his arms around me from behind while I prepared dinner or folded laundry. "None of this would be possible without you." I believed him. I believed in us. Our suburban house in Connecticut wasn't grand, but it was ours. A 4-bedroom colonial we'd purchased when the children were small. We'd spent countless weekends painting walls, planting gardens, fixing the deck. My hydrangeas bloomed magnificently every summer. The kitchen window overlooked the backyard where our children had played, where we'd hosted countless barbecues with friends and family. It was home in every sense of the word. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was making coffee, planning my day, when James came down clutching his chest, his face ashen. "Can't breathe," he gasped, collapsing into a chair. The next hours were a blur of ambulances, emergency rooms, and terrified phone calls to our children. "Massive heart attack," the doctors said. James would need emergency bypass surgery, followed by months of recovery and rehabilitation. "You're lucky you got him here so quickly," the cardiologist told me. "Another 20 minutes and we might be having a very different conversation." I remember nodding, clutching my purse to my chest, thinking, this is what marriage is for. This is why we're together. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. The surgery was successful, but James's recovery would be long. I transformed our living room into a temporary bedroom, learned how to change dressings, monitor vitals, and administer medications. I drove him to appointments, managed his complex medication schedule, and fielded concern calls from clients, friends, and family members, all while keeping our household running. "You know," our neighbor Diane said one afternoon, stopping by with a casserole, "not everyone would do what you're doing. Tom's sister's husband had a heart attack last year, and she hired a nurse instead of caring for him herself." I dismissed the comment with a wave. "We've been married for 32 years. This is what you do." But caring for James left little time for anything else. I was exhausted, sleeping just a few hours each night. Our children visited when they could, but they had their own lives. Olivia with her medical residency in Boston, Daniel with his new job in Chicago. The business was suffering without James's direct involvement, though his foreman was doing his best to keep things afloat. 3 months into James's recovery, I realized I'd missed paying some bills. This wasn't like me. I'd always been meticulous about our finances. But between the medical appointments, physical therapy sessions, and round-the-clock care, things were slipping through the cracks. "I need to get organized," I told James one evening as I helped him into bed. "I'm going to go through your office tomorrow and make sure we're not missing anything important." He stiffened slightly. "I can handle that when I'm feeling better. Don't worry about it." "Nonsense," I said, fluffing his pillow. "You need to focus on getting stronger. I can manage the paperwork." He didn't argue further, but something in his expression struck me as odd. Concern? Worry? I couldn't place it. The next morning, after getting James settled with his breakfast and medications, I went into his home office. The room was rarely used by anyone but him. A sanctuary of sorts where he handled business matters and household paperwork. Dark wood shelves lined one wall, filled with business books and family photos. His heavy oak desk dominated the space, positioned to overlook the backyard. I started with the stack of mail that had accumulated, sorting bills from personal correspondence. Then I moved on to his desk drawers, looking for our household budget folder and checkbook. The top right drawer contained pens, paper clips, and other office supplies. The left drawer held folders related to his business. When I opened the bottom drawer, I found medical insurance documents, Exactly what I needed. I pulled them out, along with several other folders, and placed them on the desk. That's when I noticed a thick manila envelope tucked under the folders. No label. Nothing to indicate what it might contain. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a document dated 6 months earlier. The header read, "Last Will and Testament of James Alexander Richardson." I frowned. We had created our wills together 15 years ago, updating them when the children turned 18. Why would there be a new one? My coffee grew cold beside me as I read through the pages, my hands beginning to tremble. According to this document, in the event of James's death, his 75% ownership of the construction business would go to his nephew Patrick. The house would be sold, with 60% of the proceeds going to our children and 40% to his sister Carolyn. His personal assets would be divided among our children and his sister's 3 children. I was mentioned only once. To my wife Sophia Richardson, I leave the sum of $25,000 and my personal vehicle. $25,000 and a 5-year-old SUV. After 32 years of marriage, I sat there staring at the paper, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. The house we'd built together, the business I'd sacrificed my career for, none of it would come to me. Instead, it would go to his sister, who had never even bothered to visit him during his recovery, and her children, who called only on Christmas and birthdays. My mind raced back over the past year. Had there been signs? Had James been acting differently? We'd had some arguments, what long-married couple didn't? But nothing that suggested such a fundamental breach of trust. I heard James calling from the living room. "Sophia? Can you help me to the bathroom?" I quickly replaced the will exactly as I'd found it, tucked the manila envelope back under the folders, and closed the drawer. With shaking hands, I gathered the medical documents I'd originally been looking for. "Coming," I called, my voice somehow steady despite the storm raging inside me. As I helped James to the bathroom, supporting his weight as he shuffled across the living room, a part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to demand an explanation. But another part, a quieter, colder part, held me back. James was still vulnerable, still dependent on me, and I needed time to think. That night, after James had fallen asleep in his temporary bedroom, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind churning. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, a knife twisting in my chest. 32 years of marriage, and I was worth less to him than his sister's children, who visited only when they wanted money or favors. I thought about all I'd given up for our marriage, the career opportunities I'd passed on, the friendships that had faded as I focused on supporting James and raising our children, the parts of myself I'd set aside to be the wife and mother my family needed. Had it all been for nothing? Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned on the living room couch, keeping one ear open in case James needed anything. By morning, a plan had begun to form. I called our family doctor and arranged for a home health aide to come 3 days a week. "You need a break," Dr. Chun insisted when I protested. "Caregiver burnout is real, Sophia. Let us help." With the aide's assistance, I could make the appointments I needed without raising James's suspicions. My first call was to Patricia Walsh, a friend from my nursing days who had gone on to become a lawyer specializing in elder law and estate planning. "I need to speak with you," I said when she answered. "It's important." We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. I brought copies of our original wills, power of attorney documents, and photos I'd taken of the new will I'd found in James's desk. Patricia's face grew grave as she reviewed the documents. "This is concerning," she said finally. "The good news is, I don't think this new will is valid." "What do you mean?" "Your original wills were created as mutual wills with a no revocation clause. Essentially, you both agreed not to change your wills without the other's knowledge and consent. Plus, you still have durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances, which James granted you 15 years ago. These haven't been revoked." A small flame of hope flickered in my chest. "So what does that mean?" "It means we have options." Patricia's expression was determined. "But first, I need to know what you want, Sophia. Do you want to confront James about this? Or do you want to protect yourself and your interests?" The question hung between us. What did I want? The answer surprised me with its clarity. "Both," I said. "I want to protect myself. And then I want him to know exactly what he's done." For the next several weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the devoted wife, caring for my recovering husband, managing our household, answering concerned calls from friends and family. By night, I gathered documents, consulted with Patricia, and built a case to protect my future. I discovered that James had taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge. My signature had been forged on the documents. I found evidence that he'd been transferring small amounts of money to a separate account for years, building a nest egg I knew nothing about. Each discovery was another blow, another crack in the foundation of what I'd thought was a solid marriage. But instead of crushing me, each revelation strengthened my resolve. "You seem distracted lately," James commented one evening as I helped him with his physical therapy exercises. He was growing stronger each day, able to move around the house with just a cane now. "Is everything okay?" I smiled, helping him stretch his arm. "Just tired. It's been a long few months. Maybe you should take some time for yourself," he suggested, patting my hand. "Go visit Olivia for a weekend. I'm doing much better now. The aide can help me while you're gone." The concern in his voice seemed genuine, making everything even more confusing. This was the man who held my hand during childbirth, who brought me tea when I was sick, who danced with me in the kitchen on our anniversary. How could he also be the man who planned to leave me with almost nothing after 3 decades together? I took him up on his suggestion, though I didn't go to Boston to see Olivia. Instead, I met with a financial advisor Patricia had recommended, transferring my personal savings to an account James couldn't access. I consulted with a real estate attorney about the house situation. I gathered evidence of my contributions to James's business over the years, the bookkeeping I'd done in the early days, the loans we'd taken against our joint assets, the clients I'd entertained in our home. "We're building a case for what's called unjust enrichment," Patricia explained. "If it comes to litigation, we'll argue that you've made substantial contributions to assets that are technically in James's name, with the expectation of shared benefit." 2 months after discovering the will, I received a call from James's foreman, Steve. "Mrs. Richardson," he said, his voice hesitant. "I'm not sure if I should be telling you this, but Mr. Richardson called me yesterday. He wants to sell the business." My heart raced. Did he say why? He mentioned restructuring for tax purposes. Said he's been talking to his nephew about taking over. I've worked for you folks for 15 years. Doesn't seem right not to give you a heads up. I thanked Steve for his loyalty, my mind already spinning with implications. James was moving forward with his plans, despite his continuing recovery. He must have been making calls from the house when I was running errands. That night I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. James was nearly recovered now, sleeping in our bedroom upstairs while I'd reclaimed the couch. We'd been living like polite roommates, the distance between us growing even as his health improved. I wondered if he'd notice my withdrawal if he cared. The next morning I made a decision. I called Patricia. "I'm ready," I said. "What's our next step?" The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after James's heart attack. He was back at work part-time, his health nearly fully restored. I'd scheduled an appointment at Patricia's office and asked James to meet me there. "What's this about?" he asked as we drove. "Why do we need to meet with a lawyer?" "It's about our estate planning," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Given your health scare, I thought we should review things." He shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat but didn't argue. Patricia's office was in a converted Victorian house, all dark wood and leather furniture. She greeted us warmly, showing us to her conference room where another man waited. "This is Michael Delaney," she introduced him. "He's a forensic accountant who's been helping me review your financial situation." James stiffened beside me. "I don't understand. Why would we need a forensic accountant?" Patricia gestured for us to sit. "Perhaps we should start with the will you created 6 months ago, Mr. Richardson. The one that effectively disinherits your wife of 32 years. The color drained from James's face. His eyes darted to me, then back to Patricia. "How did you?" "I found it," I said quietly, "while looking for insurance documents during your recovery." "Sophia," he began, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, James?" My voice was low, controlled, though my heart pounded painfully against my ribs. Because it looks like you plan to leave me with nothing after I've spent my entire adult life supporting you and your dreams. That will was just a draft. I was angry when I created it. We'd been fighting about the business, about money. I never intended to actually what? Leave it in effect? Because you never changed it back. And you didn't just create a will. You took out a second mortgage without my knowledge. You've been moving money into a separate account for years. I leaned forward. Were you planning to leave me, James? Is that why you've been systematically cutting me out of our assets? His face crumpled, not with shame but with anger. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The business has been struggling. Patrick has fresh ideas, connections we need. And Carolyn. Your sister who couldn't even be bothered to visit you in the hospital? That Carolyn. She has financial problems. Her husband left her with nothing. I was just trying to make sure everyone was taken care of. Everyone except me. The words hung in the air between us. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Richardson, we've conducted a thorough review of your finances and legal arrangements. The will you created is not valid, as it violates the terms of your mutual wills from 15 years ago. Additionally, we've documented numerous instances of financial decisions made without Mrs. Richardson's knowledge or consent, despite her being a joint owner of many assets. Michael stepped in. We've also identified several potentially problematic transfers from your business accounts to personal accounts that don't align with reported income. The IRS might have questions about those. James's face flushed with anger. Are you threatening me? No, I said calmly. We're informing you of our findings. There are two paths forward here, James. We can work this out privately, or we can let the courts decide. But either way, I will not be left with nothing after 32 years of marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the calculations happening behind James's eyes, weighing his options, considering what he stood to lose. What do you want? He finally asked, his voice hollow. Patricia slid a document across the table. We've prepared a postnuptial agreement that outlines a fair division of assets, along with a new estate plan that protects both your interests. As James read through the document, I studied his face, the face I'd woken up to for over 3 decades. I searched for traces of the man I'd married, the father of my children, the partner I'd built a life with. He felt like a stranger now. This is highway robbery, he muttered, throwing the document down. You want half my business? The house? My retirement accounts? I want what's fair, I replied. What I've earned through 32 years of partnership. What I would have had if you hadn't tried to cheat me. I need to think about this. Talk to my own lawyer. Of course, Patricia said smoothly. But be aware that if we can't reach an agreement, Mrs. Richardson is prepared to pursue this matter in court, including the potentially fraudulent financial activities we've identified. James stood abruptly. I need some air. After he left, I sat in stunned silence. Patricia touched my hand gently. You did well, Sophia. This is just the beginning of the negotiation, but you've shown him you're serious. I nodded, feeling strangely empty. The righteous anger that had carried me through the past months had dissipated, leaving behind a profound sadness. I never thought it would come to this, I whispered. Few people do, Michael said kindly. But you're protecting yourself, and you have every right to do that. When I got home that evening, James's car was gone. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Staying at Patrick's tonight. Need to clear my head. I wandered through our silent house, touching familiar objects that now seemed suffused with new meaning. The wedding photo on the mantel. The quilt James's mother had made for us. The marks on the wall where we'd measured our children's heights over the years. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, his bedroom these past months, and sat on the edge of the bed. How had we reached this point? When had love and partnership turned into calculation and betrayal? There were no easy answers. Just the weight of 3 decades together, and the uncertain path forward. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling we'd painted together 20 years ago. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and negotiations, accusations and compromises. But tonight I allowed myself to mourn what was lost, the marriage I thought I had, the husband I thought I knew. And in that morning I found something unexpected. A flicker of hope for the woman I might yet become. James didn't come home the next day or the day after that. He texted me once. Need time to think. We'll call soon. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Our children called, concerned about their father's sudden absence. Dad said he's staying with Cousin Patrick for a while? Olivia's voice was puzzled over the phone. What's going on? I hadn't wanted to drag the children into this, but I wouldn't lie to them either. Your father and I are going through some things, I said carefully. We discovered we have different views about our future. Are you getting divorced? Daniel's question was blunt when I called him later. The word hung in the air. Divorce. It felt both terrifying and liberating. I don't know yet, honey, I answered honestly. But things will change one way or another. I spent the next week meeting with Patricia, preparing for whatever came next. We documented everything, my contributions to the business, the value of the house, our retirement accounts. I pulled our tax returns for the past 15 years, gathered documentation of household expenses, made copies of insurance policies. You're very organized, Patricia commented as I handed her yet another folder of meticulously labeled documents. I've managed our household for 3 decades, I replied. I know where every penny has gone. 9 days after our confrontation, James finally called. Can we talk? He asked, his voice rough. Face to face. No lawyers. We met at a diner halfway between our house and Patrick's apartment. Neutral territory. I arrived first, claiming a booth in the corner, ordering coffee I knew I wouldn't drink. My stomach was too knotted to consume anything. James looked terrible when he walked in, unshaven with dark circles under his eyes. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. A pang of concern shot through me, followed immediately by anger at myself for still caring. He slid into the booth across from me. You look good, he said. Thank you. My voice was neutral, giving nothing away. He cleared his throat. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past days. About us. About the will. And I've spoken with my own attorney. He agrees that the will likely wouldn't stand up in court given our previous arrangements. He spread his hands on the table, staring at them rather than meeting my eyes. He also said that if we end up in a contested divorce, given the length of our marriage and other factors, you'd likely be entitled to half of everything anyway. That's generally how marriage works, James. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Equal partnership. He flinched slightly. I know. I got scared, Sophia. The business was struggling even before my heart attack. I thought if I could protect some assets for the kids, for Carolyn's family, by cutting me out entirely, after 32 years. It was wrong, he admitted. I see that now. But you have to understand. No, I interrupted, leaning forward. I don't have to understand. You betrayed me, James, in the most fundamental way possible. You were planning to leave me with practically nothing after I devoted my entire adult life to supporting you and our family. He looked down again. When you put it that way, how else should I put it? The anger I'd been controlling finally slipped out. You forged my signature on a second mortgage. You hid money from me for years. You created a will that treated me like an afterthought. Should I sugarcoat that somehow? No, he said quietly. You're right. We sat in silence for a moment, the clatter of the diner around us a strange counterpoint to the intimacy of our conversation. So what happens now? James finally asked. I've been asking myself the same question for days. What did I want? Divorce? Reconciliation? Some middle path? That depends, I said carefully. Are you willing to sign the postnuptial agreement my lawyer drafted? I've reviewed it with my attorney. Some of the terms are harsh. They reflect reality, James. Half the business, half the house, half the retirement accounts, joint ownership of our other assets. That's what should have been the arrangement all along. He nodded slowly. My lawyer suggested some minor amendments, mostly about the business structure and how transitions would work if we end up separating permanently. Patricia can review those, but the core principles are non-negotiable. He sighed deeply. Okay, I'll sign. But Sophia, is there any way back from this? Any chance for us? The question caught me off guard. Part of me, a larger part than I wanted to admit, yearned to say yes, to believe we could rebuild what was broken. But the trust was shattered. I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. I don't know, I answered honestly. Right now, I'm focused on protecting myself, on making sure I'm not left vulnerable again. That's fair. His voice was sad but resigned. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I lost sight of what matters. As we left the diner, he touched my arm lightly. Can I move back home? We have a lot to figure out, and it would be easier if we were under the same roof. I considered refusing, but practical considerations won out. You can stay in the guest room. For now. The next few weeks were strange. Living as strangers in the house we'd shared for decades. James signed the post-nuptial agreement with minimal additional negotiation. He gave me full access to all financial accounts, turned over the business records, added my name to the title of assets that should have been joint from the beginning. To the outside world, nothing had changed. We still attended family dinners with our children when they visited. We exchanged pleasantries about our days, discussed household matters, shared meals occasionally. But a chasm had opened between us, one I wasn't sure could be bridged. One evening, about a month after James had moved back in, I found him sitting in the darkened living room, looking at old photo albums. "Remember this trip?" he asked as I passed by, holding up a picture of the four of us, James, me, Olivia, and Daniel, standing on a beach in Florida. The children were young, maybe 7 and 4. We all wore matching teal t-shirts, our faces sunburned and happy. "Sanibel Island," I said. "Olivia found that seashell she kept for years. The best vacation we ever took," James said softly. "Just the four of us. No work calls, no distractions." I hesitated in the doorway, then sat beside him on the couch, leaving space between us. It was a good trip. We were happy then, weren't we? It wasn't all an illusion. The vulnerability in his voice tugged at my heart. "We were happy," I confirmed. "At least I was." "Me too." He closed the album gently. "When did things change, Sophia? When did I start seeing you as separate from me instead of part of me?" It was a profound question, one I'd been asking myself as well. When had the cracks begun? Was it when the children left home? When his business became successful? Or had it been more gradual, a slow erosion of connection over years of routine and neglect? "I don't know," I said. "Maybe we both stopped paying attention." He nodded thoughtfully. "I think for me, it started when my father died. 10 years ago." He hadn't spoken much about his father's death. A brief battle with lung cancer that had taken the stoic, distant man who'd never quite shown James the approval he craved. Why then? "He left everything to my mother, as expected. But he told me privately before he died that I needed to protect what was mine. That women, even wives, would take everything if given the chance." James looked at his hands. "I think I started seeing our assets differently after that. Started thinking of the business as mine alone, not ours. The house is something I provided, not something we built together." The insight surprised me. James had never shared this conversation before. Never connected his father's toxic advice to our marriage. "That's a terrible thing to say to your son." "My father wasn't known for his enlightened views on women," James said ruefully. "But I should have known better than to listen. You never gave me any reason to distrust you. Yet somehow, over time I started compartmentalizing. Hiding things. Planning for a future where I'd need to protect assets from you, instead of sharing them with you." His candor was unexpected, touching something deep inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. "Thank you for telling me that," I said quietly. He reached across the space between us, not quite touching me. "I want to try again, Sophia. To rebuild what we had. Or something new if that's not possible. I don't want to lose you." Part of me wanted to believe him. The part that remembered the young man who'd brought me wildflowers on our first date, who'd held my hand through 30-hour labors, who'd supported me through my parents' deaths. But another part, the part that had found that will in his desk drawer, remained wary. "I need time," I said finally. "We can't just go back to how things were." "I know." He pulled his hand back. "I'm willing to wait. To prove myself again. However long it takes." The next morning, I woke early and drove to the coast. The beach was deserted in the February chill, waves crashing against the shore under a leaden sky. I walked along the wet sand, letting the cold wind clear my head. Could I forgive James? Could we build something new from the ashes of our marriage? Did I even want to try? I thought about what a divorce would mean at my age. Starting over after 57, building a new life alone. It was daunting but also strangely appealing. I could pursue the career I'd put on hold, travel, rediscover parts of myself that had been subsumed by marriage and motherhood. But then I thought about what would be lost. 3 decades of shared history, the comfort of familiar routines, the knowledge that someone knew me, truly knew me, in ways no one else ever would. By the time I returned home, I'd made my decision. James was in the kitchen making coffee. He looked up anxiously when I entered. "I've been thinking," I said without preamble, "about us, about what happens next." He set down the coffee pot, his expression guarded. "And I can't just forgive and forget. What you did was a fundamental betrayal of everything I thought our marriage stood for." His shoulders slumped slightly. "I understand. But," I continued, "I'm not ready to throw away 32 years without at least trying to see if something can be salvaged." Hope flickered in his eyes. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I want us to see a marriage counselor. To talk openly about what happened and why. To figure out if there's a path forward that works for both of us." "I'll do whatever it takes," he said quickly. "Counseling, transparency, anything." And I added, "I want to be more involved in the business. Not just as your wife but as a partner. With real authority and input. It's time I put my business degree to use." He blinked in surprise. "You want to work in the business?" "I put my career on hold to support yours. I've managed our household finances for decades. I understand budgets, scheduling, client relations. Yes, I want to work in the business. Our business." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll need to figure out roles, responsibilities. But yes, I think that could work well. And one more thing. If we're going to try again, I need complete financial transparency. Joint accounts. Regular reviews of our finances together. No more secrets." "Absolutely. No question." I nodded, feeling strangely light. Not happy exactly but purposeful. Clear. Then we have a starting point. The next 6 months were some of the hardest and most illuminating of our marriage. Weekly counseling sessions forced us to examine patterns and assumptions that had gone unchallenged for decades. James's tendency toward control and secrecy. My habit of deferring, of putting his needs above my own. The gradual drift that had turned partners into strangers living under one roof. It's common for couples who've been together this long to fall into deeply entrenched patterns. Our counselor, Dr. Bennett, explained. The good news is you're both committed to change. That's rarer than you might think. At work, I discovered I had a talent for client relations and project management that had gone untapped for decades. I modernized our accounting systems, streamlined operations, and brought in several large contracts through connections I'd maintained from my volunteer work. "You're a natural at this," Steve, the foreman, commented after I negotiated a particularly tricky contract adjustment with a difficult client. "We should have had you involved years ago." James and I still lived somewhat separate lives at home. He in the guest room, me in the master bedroom. But slowly, incrementally, we began to rebuild trust. He gave me full access to all financial information, consulted me on business decisions, and showed genuine remorse for his actions through both words and behavior. "I don't think I ever really saw you," he said one night after a counseling session. "Not fully. I saw the roles you played, wife, mother, supporter of my dreams. But I didn't see you as your own person, with your own ambitions and needs." "I didn't let you see me," I admitted. "I thought being a good wife meant putting myself last. My mother always said, 'A happy husband means a happy home.'" "That's a terrible philosophy," James said, surprising me. "A marriage should lift both people up, not just one." 8 months after I discovered the will, Olivia came home for a weekend visit. We were having dinner in the backyard, the 3 of us, when she looked between James and me thoughtfully. "Something's different," she said. "You two seem, I don't know, more like equals somehow." James and I exchanged glances. We hadn't told the children the full story. Just that we'd been working through some difficulties. We've made some changes, I said simply, in how we relate to each other, in how we structure our lives together. Well, whatever it is, it suits you, she said, raising her wine glass. Especially you, Mom. You seem stronger, more confident. Later that night, after Olivia had gone to bed, James and I sat together on the porch swing. The evening was warm, crickets chirping in the garden I planted years ago. She's right, you know, James said quietly. You've changed. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better. You're formidable now. Not that you weren't always strong, but it's different. More visible. I considered this. I feel different. Like I've found parts of myself that were dormant for years. I like this version of you, he said. Even when you're challenging me, making me uncomfortable. Maybe especially then. I smiled slightly. I like this version of me too. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been hovering between us for months. Do you think? Would you consider moving back into our bedroom? Not for anything more than sleep necessarily. Just being together again. The question didn't surprise me. We'd been inching toward reconciliation for weeks. The anger that had once burned so brightly had faded, replaced by something more complex. Not the blind trust of before, but a more clear-eyed acceptance of who we were, flaws and all. Yes, I said. I think I'm ready for that. That night, lying beside James in the bed we'd shared for decades, I felt a strange sense of coming full circle. We weren't the same people we'd been a year ago. Our marriage wasn't the same either. Something had broken that could never be completely mended. But perhaps from those broken pieces we could create something new, something stronger because it acknowledged the cracks instead of pretending they didn't exist. 3 years have passed since I found that will in James's desk drawer. Our marriage bears little resemblance to what it once was. We're true partners now in business and in life. The construction company has expanded, with me managing operations while James focuses on his strength, building relationships with clients and contractors. Last year we revised our wills together, ensuring that each of us would be secure regardless of who passes first. We've set up trusts for our children and modest provisions for James's sister and her family. No secrets, no hidden agendas. Just transparent planning for a future we may not share. The irony isn't lost on me. James's betrayal ultimately led to a more honest, balanced relationship than we'd ever had before. The pain was excruciating. The trust nearly impossible to rebuild. Many women in my position would have left, and I don't judge them for it. Some betrayals can't be overcome, but for us somehow crisis became opportunity. Not because I forgave and forgot, I didn't and haven't, but because we used the broken places as openings for light to enter, illuminating patterns that had kept us both trapped in roles that no longer served us. James's heart attack was nearly 4 years ago now. His health has stabilized, though he'll always need to monitor his diet and stress levels. Sometimes when I watch him playing with our grandchildren or working in the garden we now tend together, I marvel at how close I came to losing everything. Not just him but my financial security, my stake in the life we'd built together. What are you thinking about? He asked recently, catching me watching him from the porch as he pruned the hydrangeas I love so much. How different things could have been, I answered honestly, if I hadn't found that will. He set down his pruning shears, coming to sit beside me. His face was solemn. I think about that too. How close I came to destroying everything important. Do you think you would have gone through with it? Left me with almost nothing. He considered the question carefully. I'd like to say no. That I would have come to my senses. But the truth is I don't know. I'd convinced myself I was doing the right thing, protecting the family assets in my own convoluted way. His honesty was a measure of how far we'd come. The old James would have offered reassurances, smoothed over difficult truths. This James knew better than to offer pretty lies. Thank you for being honest, I said. That means more than a comforting falsehood. He took my hand, his palm rough against mine. What about you? Do you ever regret staying? Trying again? Now it was my turn for difficult honesty. Sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. When I think about the woman I might have become on my own. He nodded, accepting this without defensiveness. That's fair. You would have been magnificent on your own too. The difference is I get to find out who I am either way now, I said. With you or without you, I'm Sophia first. Not just Mrs. Richardson. He smiled at that. That's the best change of all. We sat together as the sun set, two imperfect people who had nearly lost everything, including ourselves, before finding a way back to each other through brutal honesty and hard work. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real one. Not perfect, but enough. More than enough.